Salutations again, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland with yet another video about gun control and even further arguments about why there ought to be more gun safety legislation in the United States. It's a topic I feel I've almost exhausted, as I'm not going into it with academic depth. So, pro-gun people, they often bring on ex-military personnel onto television talk shows to espouse their pro-gun advocacy, thinking that the viewers will be overawed by the fact that this person used to be in the US military. That's the argument from authority. Ben Shapiro, he's a pro-gun advocate, and he disparages the argument from authority. Well, the argument of authority can be valid. Suppose I was arguing against a doctor about something medical. That doctor would almost certainly be right, because it really is a matter of knowledge. And it's true that military personnel tend to know more about firearms than the average person, but that doesn't mean that their opinion would carry more weight when we have to decide who should be allowed to own what firearms, where should they be allowed to carry them, and so forth. Anyway, on to examining more pro-gun arguments. I've noticed from the comments on my videos that some of the pro-gun people are very anti-Muslim. So Islamophobia is detestable as much as the prejudice against any other religion. Now, they're good and bad people of all faiths, but I'm certainly not prejudiced against my Mohammedan brethren. I've lived in Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia. They didn't mistreat me. I had Muslim friends. I've had 3 Muslim girlfriends. Could easily have got married to one of them. Had Muslim colleagues, Muslim housemates, and so forth. I've taught in schools where 9 out of 10 of my pupils were Muslims. So it's absurd to imagine because someone happens to be brought up a Muslim, he or she is a bad person. And there are Muslim Americans. US citizens who are Muslims have just as much right to live in the United States as anybody else. And they've served in the US military too. If they're so bad, why would you allow them to join the US military? Why wouldn't you take away all their rights? Perhaps some want to do that. Why was Trump dancing with the King of Saudi Arabia, who is the head of state of the most theocratic Muslim country of all? If Muslims are so wicked, it's nonsensical. And yes, there are Muslims in my country, and they're citizens in many cases, and they're absolutely entitled to be there as much as I am. So there are guns in the Muslim world. Some of you gun enthusiasts ought to think Afghanistan is wonderful, or Pakistan, where many people have automatic weapons, or Yemen, where it's seen as the most normal thing in the world for a man to have an AK-47. It's almost as though it were a basic right there. Anyway, back to gun deaths in the United States. A high majority of Americans are Christians, and so most gun murders are carried out by Christians. So stop trying to scapegoat Muslims. Christian fundamentalists and Muslim fundamentalists agree on a lot more than either would care to admit. Some arch-conservatives in the United States who rail against Islam would actually be rather happy in a Sharia state where homosexuality was a crime, where extramarital sex is a crime, where obviously pornography is outlawed, where abortion is outlawed, alcohol is often outlawed. I can't think what else you would approve of, that women really have to cover up, that men are definitely in charge. I think it would suit you just fine. Where the death penalty is used very extensively, you know, you might well be at home in a Sharia state. So what I'm saying is not unflattering about the United States. There are many Americans who agree with me. So some of the gun advocates are very right-wing, but don't be so touchy. Just because I think something about your country isn't perfect doesn't mean you should be overly defensive and just react in a childish manner, lashing out and so on. Perhaps my country has it wrong. Maybe we'd be much better off if we were allowed assault rifles and would have fewer deaths. Somehow, I very much doubt it, but I welcome your admonition. So tell me if you feel I'm going wrong. Incidentally, it's not a left-right issue. It's often framed this way by gun rights advocates. There are a few left-wing Americans who believe in very extensive gun rights. Would you not accept left-wing support if it were offered? Charlton Heston was formerly president of the NRA. He was seen as a bit of a left-winger in the 60s, campaigning for racial equality. Or John Kerry, when he stood for the presidency, he was very keen to have himself filmed coming back from having been shooting Canada geese to show that he believes in gun rights too. I believe in gun rights, only more circumscribed than they are at the moment. Put it another way, the United States also has gun safety, like Ireland does, except your gun safety is more limited than it is in Ireland, where in the Republic of Ireland it's more extensive than the United States. So one doesn't have to be an absolutist in either direction. Why do so many people think that they have to have lots of guns? And I wonder whether some men, they doubt their own masculinity, which is why they feel compelled to assert their machismo by buying loads of firearms. So they think it makes them braver or something. It seems preposterous to me. Surely it's counterintuitive. I mean, who's actually more courageous? The chap who has an arsenal in his house, or the man who's got no firearms at all? Who's actually more afraid? The one who needs to tool up doesn't seem to be particularly brave. I'm not a brave person, but I don't suffer from some crushing sense of inadequacy which obliges me to have an awful lot of weapons, enough to start a small war. So some people have said, oh, you're a liberal or you're a socialist on the basis of no evidence at all. My position, I'm actually a former member of the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. I've supported Brexit. I've supported UKIP for a few years, shifting away from them a bit. Never actually been a UKIP member. So I'm actually not a left-winger. Conservative is one of these words which means something different in British English from in the United States. So I'm not an American sort of conservative, which would seem to me to be a Puritan, probably a Christian fundamentalist, a militarist, and a hyper-capitalist, except for corporate welfare, things like that. So unfortunately, these tragedies in the United States are avoidable. Can't be prevented entirely. They could be reduced in their frequency and their severity. We might as well set the clock. There are going to be more gun massacres in the United States. It could be a week, it could be a month, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems to me almost a matter of time before the next one happens. And until the United States introduces proper gun control, it is going to continue happening. And that's probably the most heartbreaking thing about it, is to a large extent, it is avoidable. No law in the world would prevent gun deaths altogether, but they could be very significantly reduced. That's the case with most problems. There's the absolutist fallacy, those saying, well, if you can't prevent it absolutely, then you shouldn't try to prevent it at all, which is preposterous. One can reduce the problem, even if one cannot obviate it altogether. So that's all I've got to say about gun deaths at the moment, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.